The average lifespan of a democracy is 200 years. The United States of America is currently 250 years old. We are 50 years past the expiration date. We are living on borrowed time, borrowed money, and borrowed trust. And the bill has finally come due. Most people think we are fighting to save our democracy, but a Scottish historian named Alexander Tytler predicted centuries ago that by the time you reach this stage, the fight is already over. Why? Because of a single fatal flaw in the human brain that turns voters into looters. Those words were not written about the United States in 2025. They were not written by a modern economist analyzing our $35 trillion of debt, or our spiraling inflation, or the checks sent out by the government to buy compliancy during the last crisis. Those words are attributed to a Scottish historian named Alexander Tytler. And they were written over 200 years ago, at the exact moment the American Republic was being born. We are told that history is a straight line. We are taught in school that humanity is on a constant upward trajectory of progress, that we started in caves, moved to kingdoms, evolved into democracies, and that somehow we have reached the end of history, that the system we have now is permanent, unshakable, and final. But that is a lie. History is not a line. History is a circle. It is a wheel that turns with a terrifying mathematical precision. And the engine that turns that wheel is not technology or geography or luck. The engine is human nature. Alexander Tytler studied the great democracies of the past. He looked at Athens. He looked at Rome. He looked at the republics of Europe. And he realized that every single one of them followed the exact same life cycle. They did not die at random. They died because of a specific sequence of choices, a psychological progression that moves a civilization from chains to freedom and inevitably back to chains. He called this the cycle of democracy. It consists of 8 specific stages: bondage, spiritual faith, courage, liberty, abundance, selfishness, apathy, dependence. And then, finally, back to bondage. The average lifespan of the world's greatest civilizations has been 200 years. The United States of America officially turns 250 years old in 2026. We are living on borrowed time. We are mathematical outliers, stretching the rubber band until it snaps. Most Americans believe we are currently fighting to preserve our liberty stage 4. Optimists believe we are still in the age of abundance, stage 5. But if you look at the data, if you look at the debt, the culture, the division, and the dependency of the population on the state, the math suggests we are far past abundance. We have accelerated through selfishness. And in 2025, we slammed explicitly into stage 7, the Age of Apathy. And if the cycle holds true, if the pattern that destroyed Rome and Athens applies to us, there is only one stage left before the lights go out. Today, we are going to walk through the anatomy of our own demise. We are going to overlay the Tytler Cycle onto the timeline of American history to see exactly where we are, how we got here, and what comes next. This is not a political opinion. This is an autopsy of a living system. To understand why the United States is fracturing right now, you have to understand the mechanism of the cycle itself. Why does it happen? Why can't a democracy stay free forever? The answer lies in the paradox of comfort. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. You have heard this saying before. It is a meme, a cliche. But Tytler's cycle is the academic framework behind that cliche. The cycle is driven by memory, or rather, the loss of it. The generation that fights for freedom remembers the pain of oppression. They value liberty because they know the price of it. But their children only know the stories, and their grandchildren, they know nothing of the struggle. To the grandchild, liberty is not a prize won in blood. It is a default setting. It is like the air, invisible, assumed, and unappreciated. When you stop appreciating the foundation, you stop maintaining it. And when you stop maintaining it, it begins to rot. This is why no superpower in history has ever been conquered from the outside, until it had already rotted from the inside. The Tytler Cycle is not a story of murder. It is a story of suicide. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's trace the arc of the American experiment through these stages to prove that we are not special. We are just the latest passengers on the wheel. Stage 1 is bondage. Every great cycle begins in the dark. It begins with a population that has no agency, no voice, and no hope. For the Israelites, it was Egypt. For the erratic tribes of Europe, it was the iron boot of the Roman legions. For the American story, strictly speaking, this phase was the tyranny of the old world monarchies. But bondage is not just physical chains. It is a psychological state where the individual believes they are powerless against the state. The king is divine, the subject is dirt. This state can last for centuries. It is the default state of human history. Most humans who have ever lived in stage 1. But eventually, the pressure builds. The human spirit is compressed until it triggers a reaction. This leads to stage 2, spiritual faith. Now, do not misunderstand this term. When Tytler speaks of spiritual faith, he is not necessarily talking about organized religion, although that is often the vehicle. He is talking about the sudden collective realization that there is a higher law than the state. For the American founders, this was the Enlightenment realization of natural rights. The radical, dangerous idea that your rights do not come from the king, and they do not come from the parliament. They come from God or nature, and therefore no man can take them away. This is the spark. You cannot have a revolution without this stage. If you believe the king owns you, you will never rebel. You have to believe that the king is violating a cosmic law in order to risk your life to stop him. In the 1700s, this spiritual faith swept through the colonies. It wasn't just in the churches, it was in the taverns, the pamphlets, the town halls. A shared moral clarity that said, we are meant to be free. This shared belief is the only thing strong enough to break the inertia of bondage. Faith without works is dead. And faith in the Tytler Cycle must be hardened into stage 3. Courage. This is the war. This is the crossing of the Delaware. This is the moment where the belief is tested by fire. Courage is the most romanticized stage of the cycle. We build statues to the men of stage 3. We carve their faces into mountains. But we often forget what stage 3 actually looks like. It looks like starvation. It looks like Valley Forge. It looks like freezing to death in the snow for an abstract idea. A society in stage 3 is unified by an existential threat. There is no polarization in a foxhole. During the American Revolution, and arguably again during the Civil War and World War II, the United States tapped into this reservoir of courage. But here is the catch. Stage 3 is unsustainable. You cannot live in a permanent state of war. Adrenaline fades. The human body and the body politic craves rest. If the courage pays off, if the war is won, the society graduates to the most delicate, fleeting, and beautiful stage of all. Stage 4 is liberty. This is the moment the guns go silent. The dust settles, the tyrant is gone. For the United States, this was the ratification of the Constitution. It was 1789. It was the moment the energy of the revolution was captured and codified into law. Stage 4 is the apex of political structure. It is the moment where the government is small, the individual is large, and the rules are clear. In stage 4, the citizens view the government not as a provider, but as a protector. The government's only job is to keep the wolves away so the people can build. In this stage, taxes are low. Regulation is non-existent. Opportunity is infinite, provided you have the will to seize it. But liberty is terrifyingly fragile. Tytler observed that liberty usually lasts only a single generation. Why? Because the generation that builds the liberty remembers the courage it took to get there. But their children just see the open field. They don't see the fence that holds back the jungle. The United States managed to extend stage 4 longer than most. We had the advantage of an entire continent to expand into. The frontier acted as a pressure valve, keeping the spirit of liberty alive because survival was still difficult. As long as life is hard, liberty remains essential. But eventually the hard work pays off. The forests are cleared, the cities are built, the railroads connect the oceans, the factories hum, and liberty produces its own killer. Liberty inevitably leads to stage 5, abundance. This is the peak of the empire. This is Rome under Augustus. This is Britain under Victoria. This is the United States in the 1950s, 60s, and 90s. Abundance feels like victory. It looks like the golden age. The standard of living explodes. The middle class emerges. Famine is forgotten. Disease is conquered. Even the poorest citizens live better than the kings of stage 1. In the United States, stage 5 was the post-war miracle. We owned half the world's GDP. We went to the moon. We built the interstate highway system. A single income could buy a house, a car, and support a family. On the surface, stage 5 looks like the goal of the entire cycle. Isn't this what we fought for? Isn't this why we endured the bondage and the war? To be rich? To be safe? To be comfortable? Yes, but therein lies the poison. Abundance changes the wiring of the human brain. In stage 3, courage, and stage 4, liberty, the primary virtue is self-reliance. You succeed because you work. You survive because you are strong. But in stage 5, abundance, the primary virtue shifts. When there is so much wealth sloshing around, the focus shifts from creating wealth to distributing wealth. The questions change. In stage 4, the question is, what can I build? In stage 5, the question becomes, what do I deserve? This is the psychological pivot point. This is where the cancer starts. It is invisible at first. It hides behind the graphs of rising GDP and soaring stock markets. During the age of abundance, the society begins to lose its shared purpose. When you don't have to fight for survival, you start fighting each other. When there is no external enemy, you invent internal ones. We saw this begin in the late 20th century, the fracturing of the common narrative. the rise of consumerism as a religion. We defined ourselves not by our character or our contribution, but by what we consumed, by the brands we wore, by the cars we drove. Abundance separates consequence from action. In a harsh world, if you don't hunt, you don't eat. In an abundant world, you cannot hunt and still eat. In fact, you can eat very well. This removes the evolutionary pressure that keeps a society sharp. The muscle begins to atrophy. The vigilance fades. Tytler warned that abundance is the drug that sedates the population before the surgery. It makes us soft. It makes us compliant. It makes us take for granted the complex machinery that keeps the lights on. We assume the electricity will always work. We assume the shelves will always be full. We assume the money will always have value. And because we assume it is automatic, we stop watching the people running the machine. Somewhere between the year 2000 and 2008, the United States crossed an invisible line. We didn't see it at the time. We were distracted by the dot-com boom, the housing bubble, the cheap credit, the illusion of infinite growth. But looking back, the historical markers are undeniable. This was the moment where the logic of the ballot box changed. Tytler's prophecy that voters would discover they can vote themselves, large S, became the dominant political strategy. Politics stopped being a debate about philosophy. It stopped being a debate about liberty versus tyranny. It became a bidding war. One side offered a tax cut. The other side offered a subsidy. One side promised a stimulus check. The other side promised a bailout. The politician who promised hard work and sacrifice became unelectable. The politician who promised free and instant became inevitable. This is the mechanism that ends stage 5. The abundance is no longer generated by production. It is generated by debt. We started eating the seed corn. We started borrowing from our grandchildren to pay for our own comfort. And this brings us to the most dangerous transition in the entire cycle, the moment where the collective mindset shifts from we are in this together to I need to get mine before it all runs out. We left the age of abundance, and we entered stage 6, the age of selfishness. In part 2, we are going to look at the darker half of the cycle. We are going to dissect the age of selfishness and how it shattered our communities. We are going to examine stage 7, the age of apathy, which is where we are sitting right now, watching the world burn on our screens, too numb to move. And finally, we are going to look at the last stage, the stage that comes after the money dies, the stage that comes when the apathy is broken by hunger. Stage 8, dependence, the return to bondage. The cycle is turning. The wheel is crushing the abundance we thought would last forever. But the scariest part isn't that the system is breaking. The scariest part is that we are letting it happen. We ended part 1 at the precipice, the moment where abundance curdles, the moment where a society stops asking, what can we build together, and starts asking, how do I get mine? Welcome to stage 6, the age of selfishness. This stage is deceptive. On the surface, the skyscrapers are still standing. The stock market is often hitting all-time highs. The restaurants are full. But if you look at the foundation, the termites are swarming. Selfishness is not just about individual greed. It is about institutional looting. In stage 6, the common good is replaced by special interests. The political system ceases to be a forum for governance and becomes a weapon for extraction. Corporations lobby for loopholes, unions lobby for protections that kill innovation, bankers lobby for bailouts. And the voters? The voters stop caring about the long-term health of the nation. They vote strictly for the candidate who promises to protect their specific subsidy, their specific pension, their specific tax break. Alexander Tytler warned that this is the point of no return. Once the treasury is unlocked, there is no way to close the door. We saw this accelerate wildly in the early 21st century. We saw the financialization of the American economy. We stopped making things. We started moving money around. We celebrated financial engineering over mechanical engineering. We taught an entire generation that success wasn't about production. It was about leverage. It was about flipping houses, trading options, and getting rich quick without adding value to the ecosystem. This creates a fracture in the soul of the nation. The social contract breaks. Why should the carpenter work hard for 30 years when the banker creates $1 billion out of thin air and gets bailed out when he fails? Why should the citizen follow the law when the leaders openly violate it? In stage 6, trust evaporates. And when trust goes, transaction costs go up. Every interaction becomes a battle. Every neighbor becomes a potential rival. We saw this in the cultural polarization of the 2010s. We stopped viewing our political opponents as mistaken. We started viewing them as evil. We retreated into our tribes. We walled off our communities. But selfishness is exhausting. Constant conflict, constant striving, constant anxiety about keeping up with the Joneses while the currency debases beneath your feet. It wears a population down. Eventually, the public realizes that the game is rigged. They realize that no matter who they vote for, the debt goes up. No matter who is in charge, the wars continue. No matter how hard they work, the inflation eats their savings. When a population realizes they have no power to change the trajectory, they stop trying. The anger burns out. The fighting stops. And the silence that follows is stage 7. This is where we are today. Stage 7. The age of apathy. Apathy is not peace. Apathy is learned helplessness. It is the psychological state of a victim who has stopped fighting back. Look around you in 2025. Look at the reaction to the news. 10 years ago, if the government admitted to spying on every citizen, or if the currency lost 20% of its value in 3 years, there would have been riots. There would have been marches. There would have been outrage. Today, there is a shrug. We scroll past it. Oh, another $1 trillion printed? Okay. Oh, another war in a country I can't find on a map? Fine. Oh, the electricity prices doubled? I guess that's just life. This is the hallmark of stage 7, the normalization of decay. In the age of apathy, corruption is no longer a scandal. It is an expectation. We expect our leaders to lie. We expect the media to manipulate. We expect the infrastructure to crumble. We lower our standards to match the declining reality. Tytler observed that in this stage, the citizen completely disengages from the state. Voter turnout might fluctuate, but true civic engagement dies. The public square becomes a ghost town, or worse, a theater for performative distraction. We focus on sports. We focus on celebrity gossip. We focus on video games. We retreat into digital worlds because the real world has become too depressing, too complex, and too broken to fix. This apathy is dangerous. In fact, it is fatal. Because while the good people are asleep, the wolves are working overtime. While we are distracted by our screens, the legal framework of the nation is being dismantled. The checks and balances are being eroded. The surveillance state is being hardened. The currency is being finalized for its destruction. The ruling class loves. Stage 7. Apathy is profitable. An apathetic population is easy to rule. They don't ask questions. They don't audit the books. They just want to be left alone. But you cannot be left alone forever. Reality has a way of kicking in the door. Apathy works as long as the bread is cheap and the circus is entertaining. But eventually the math catches up. The debt supercycle that fueled the apathy reaches its mathematical limit. The printing press overheats. The supply chains break. And suddenly the lights flicker. The grocery store shelves go empty. The pension check doesn't buy milk. The apathy is shattered by panic. And in that moment of panic, when the comfortable, selfish, apathetic citizen realizes they are about to starve, they will do anything. They will trade anything. They will trade their last shred of liberty for a promise of security. This brings us to the final room. The end of the experiment. Stage 8. The age of dependence. This is not a theoretical future. This is the active plan. Dependence is when the individual cannot survive without the direct intervention of the state. It is when the government ceases to be a referee and becomes the provider of daily bread. We are seeing the infrastructure for Stage 8 being built right now. Universal basic income, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, digital ID systems, carbon tracking. These are not separate technologies. They are the walls of the Stage 8 cage. In previous eras, dependence was feudalism. You worked the Lord's land, you ate the Lord's grain. If you disobeyed the Lord, you starved. In the 21st century, dependence looks like stimulus. It looks like relief. Imagine a crisis, a cyber attack, a grid failure, a hyperinflationary collapse. The economy freezes. Your credit card stops working. Your bank account is inaccessible. The supply trucks stop moving. The apathy of Stage 7 turns into the terror of Stage 8. And then the solution is presented. The government offers a new app, a new digital wallet. Download this, they say. We will deposit credits instantly. You can buy food. You can pay rent. You're saved. Who refuses that offer? When your children are hungry, who stands on principle? Almost no one. The population accepts the dependence. They accept the terms and conditions, and the terms are simple: total compliance. If you spend the money on approved items, it works. If you support the approved narrative, it works. If you behave, you eat. This is the completion of the cycle. The citizen has voluntarily handed over their agency. They are no longer a citizen. They are a client, a dependent, a subject. The liberty of Stage 4 is a distant memory. The courage of Stage 3 is a myth. The abundance of Stage 5 is a ruin. We have arrived at the destination. Stage 8 does not last long. Dependence is an unstable transition state. It quickly hardens into the final reality, the return to bondage. The wheel has turned 360 degrees. We are back in Egypt. We are back under the Caesars. The state is the master. The individual is the servant. The rights you thought were inalienable are revealed to be privileges granted by the sovereign, revocable at the click of a mouse. And the tragedy is that we voted for it. Step by step, decade by decade, we chose the easy path. We chose the subsidy over the struggle. We chose the safety over the freedom. We walked into the cell and locked the door from the inside because we were scared of the storm outside. This is the Tytler Cycle. It has killed every democracy in history. And looking at the data, looking at the selfishness, the apathy, and the rising dependence, it is killing the United States right now. So, is this the end of the video? Is the message simply give up? No, because there is one variable that Alexander Tytler could not account for: you. The cycle describes the behavior of masses. It describes the statistical average of human weakness. It describes what the herd does. But you do not have to be the herd. History shows us that while empires collapse and democracies commit suicide, individuals can survive. Individuals can thrive. There's always a remnant, a group of people who see the cycle turning and refuse to participate in the apathy. They are the ones who build the arcs while the sun is still shining. They are the ones who diversify their assets outside of the dying system. They are the ones who build strong communities that do not rely on the state for survival. They are the ones who teach their children the values of Stage 3, courage, and Stage 4, liberty, even while the world around them descends into Stage 8. You cannot save the empire. The math is too far gone. The gravity of the cycle is too heavy. But you can save your household. You can exit the age of apathy today. You can reject the age of dependence tomorrow. You can decide that even if the nation returns to bondage, you will remain free. The wheel is turning. The hour is late. The age of apathy is ending, and the bills are coming due. The only question that matters now is not what will the government do? The question is, what will you do?